We'll just call it the power of God flowing through us. So we have the what, the why, and the how of prayer. And some of you know that in my former life, and still in a very small part of my current life, I have been a classroom English teacher. And that's always, we had a rollout one time about 10 years ago where we needed to start writing the what, the why, and the how of every lesson onto the board so that our students could come in and know what we're doing. And so when I was looking at these 3 weeks, I was thinking that's what Yogananda is doing for us. It's the what, the why, and the how of prayer. Because, prayer really is so essential on this path. And so today, even though the topic doesn't say, how do we pray? Really, today we're talking about the how. And the answer, if you didn't catch it already, is with our faith, through faith. And when I was thinking about the how of prayer, the first thing that I was reminded of was a story that took place. Some of you may remember a few years ago, I think about 5 years ago now, we put on here in Palo Alto a production called Whispers from Eternity. And Mahavir, who I don't see here today, did a very beautiful, he had the inspiration to turn this book of Yogananda's prayer demands into a play that we performed here on stage, and we brought it up to Ananda Village. And he wove this beautiful story of the awakening of the soul and their longing to be one with the divine. And through all of the words of Whispers from Eternity and different prayer demands that he selected along the way, there were about 5 of us in this production who were the little souls who reached our full potential. And then, of course, there were narrators and dancers. It was a beautiful production that we put on, which you can still find online. And who knows, maybe someday we'll be doing it again here. But one day, Mahavir is a wonderful director, and he really helps to draw the best out of his actors. And I happened to be one of his actors. And for those of you that don't know me well, acting, improv, all of that, standing up on a stage, ironically, is not my favorite place to be in the world. And so one day we were doing an exercise, and there were 5 of us. It was Kashama, James, myself, Craig, and Saranya. And we were repeating these prayer demands in the weaving of this story. And in order to get us to that place of open-heartedness and receptivity, he said, I want you to begin by standing up. We were in the yoga center, and he said, I want you to stand up and just start praying to God. Just pray openly and effusively and give your heart to God, and then get yourself centered and say your prayer demand. And so we went one after another, Kshama and Saranya and James and Craig, and everybody was doing this. And then it was my turn, and I stand up a little bit sheepishly, and Mahavir says, okay, Lakshmi, how would you pray to God? And I stopped for a moment, and I said, silently and in my head. And to his testament, he said, wonderful, great, take your time, close your eyes, say your prayer, and then when you're ready, pray or offer your prayer demand. It was very beautiful, but it was so sweet. I was just thinking, how on earth can I get up there and pray to God in front of my friends? Just how would I pray? Silently and in my head. And, we're laughing, and it was a sweet story, and that's the reason it popped into my head, because prayer is so personal. And when I was thinking about what prayer looks like here at Ananda, how it's been manifested, it's manifested and woven into every aspect of our life. And not only because Swami Kriyananda, I think it was just last week, Shanti was referencing the conduct for the members of Ananda Sangha, and it says pray before meals, pray before meetings, pray before major decisions, pray when you wake up in the morning, pray when you're going to bed at night, pray before you meditate. And that's not the only reason that prayer is such an essential thread that's woven through the culture of Ananda, though of course it's present there. But when I was thinking about that question of how do we pray, I realized that at Ananda, we pray in so many ways. Every time I've seen somebody up here, and Suryani's person I was thinking of most recently who's done it, who's offered a dance, that's a prayer. Or anytime we're watching somebody building a beautiful garden, that's a prayer. Anything where we're evoking the presence of the divine and we're offering our heart in inspiration, we're offering our prayer. And that's the most beautiful part about Ananda and living this life. Well, not the most beautiful, but a beautiful aspect. There are too many to count. But such a beautiful aspect of Ananda is that we're really offered an opportunity to express our prayer, to express our devotion to God through everything that we do, which is why that Whispers that was read today was so beautiful. Help me to behold God in everything. Help my eye to be thine eye, to see God everywhere. Because in essence, this is the answer to the question, how do we pray? How do we pray? We pray with faith. And what is faith? Faith is the absolute knowing that you are completely enveloped in God's love. And that's the mistake that we can make sometimes. Our ego wants to say, okay, here's prayer. It's a call to action. I'm going to have faith. I'm going to zoom into my life with courage and conviction. And sometimes that's what's needed. But whenever we get into that place of thinking, I'm going to have faith that God's going to work, that this is going to work out for me. I'm going to have faith that God is going to show up and make things right. The ego's present. It's just right there. It's in the midst of it. But if we stand back and say, I have perfect faith that I am loved by God unconditionally, without, as Sri Yukteswar says in Autobiography of a Yogi, without condition, without boundary, and without change, that no matter what, I am always sitting right in the very presence of God's love. Then when we're in that state of consciousness, we are untouched by the world around us. That's true faith. That's a true act of faith. And when I was thinking about this reading that we have today, where I'm going to forget it, with the words of it now, but Matthew says to us, ask and you shall receive it. Demand and you shall have it. He's not talking about that perfect job that we want, or the 3-bedroom house in the right area that we want, or the car that we want. That's not what we get. Ask and you shall receive it. God doesn't care if you get a new car or not. But what is it that we're asking for? If we ask for God's love, if we demand God's love, then it is ours without exception. And we can carry that forth. And suddenly what we begin to find is that as we are living in that state of love, we begin to manifest that in everything that we do. That love really is at the very root of everything, because without love, we can't move forward. Love is a quality and we've all had that experience of feeling loved. Whenever we feel loved, it's such an ennobling quality. It's an empowering quality. It's energizing. Without that experience of love, we're stuck. We're stuck and we can't move, which is why Sri Yukteswar can say to us that we can't take one step on the spiritual path without awakening the natural love of the heart. Because the natural love of the heart is the reminder that no matter what, our direction, our focus, our attention is always looking upward at the divine. A beautiful story that expresses this, many of you may know, is the story of Padmapada. And Padmapada was one of a few disciples of Adi Shankaracharya. And the way that the story goes is that some of the other disciples who were with Adi Shankaracharya were a little bit jealous because they felt that this great teacher was favoring Padmapada. That wasn't his name at the time. I think his name was, I read it this morning, but Sunandanan. That was his name prior to this event that I'm going to share about today. And so in order to show these other disciples that the very root of Sunandanan's love and devotion, and to help to rid them of their jealousy, he brings them all to the Ganges, the banks of the Ganges one day, and he stands on the banks and he says, I'm going to give a lesson. And on the other side of the river is Sunandanan doing some laundry and some chores, and all of his other disciples are here sitting around him at his feet. And he calls to his disciple, Sunandanan, whom all of these other people were a little bit jealous of and felt that Adi Shankaracharya was favoring him. And he calls him over, and without a moment's hesitation, Sunandanan starts walking across the river. And he's just rushing over toward his guru. And the story is that every time he stepped onto the water in the Ganges, a lotus leaf, a lotus flower, met his foot. And it helped him to walk across. And these lotus flowers carried him across the river. And when he got to the other side of the river, all of these other disciples bowed down in understanding of just the devotion of his love. And he was renamed Padmapan, which means lotus foot, because he was rushing across the river. And Adi Shankaracharya goes on to share that the root of this, the reason that these lotus flowers were able to manifest like that, was because of Padmapada's devotion and faith. Can we change to a standing mic? Is that okay? I'm sorry, you guys. It's just... It's okay. It's good to be contained sometimes. Can't run around. And so when we have the beauty of this story, what stands out to us, or what stood out to me in the midst of this story, it's easy to believe that what was happening here was the guru's love and the guru's celebration of the devotion of his disciple helped to manifest each of these lotus leaves as he crossed the river. But in fact, what Adi Shankaracharya says is that it was his devotion, it was Padmapada's devotion that manifested the lotus leaves, that it was from within, that devotion, that love, that desire for nothing but his guru. His guru calls him and says, come right over. He doesn't hesitate for a moment, just begins to walk across the river, and that steadfast love, that faith. The faith wasn't, oh, my guru is going to help me get across the river. That thought wasn't even in his mind. But he was carried by the love. He was carried by that one pointed focus and that devotion. And in the midst of that faith, that love is what manifested the miracle as he walked across the river. And, this was particularly poignant for me. Shanti and Sai Ganesh have both been up on this dais since returning from India, but I haven't yet, so you get to hear some of my stories now. And this was particularly poignant for me because one day Shanti and I woke up very early in the morning and we went to the Ganges. I mistakenly thought that we were going to the Ganges because we were going to be there alone and have a little bit of quiet time and meditate, but I quickly learned that there's no alone in India, no matter where you are. But it was still really beautiful and quiet. And we were just sitting and watching the river, and she's told the story. She actually got into the river and was playing with a few other people there and blessing each other. And I was sitting up on the shore and the banks and just watching and having the most surreal experience of feeling Mother Ganga and her power as she's flowing on this river. And you can't help but feel that she's coaxing you with her love, and she's drawing you more and more deeply and inviting you into states of consciousness, into places that you didn't even know existed. And I was sitting on the banks, knowing quite logically that if I were to just jump into the river and probably never come back because it was the monsoon season and there was a strong current, and even though I'm a pretty strong swimmer, I probably wouldn't have made my way back out of the river. There was that inclination and that desire to just jump right in because that love is so strong and it's so inviting and it's just drawing and coaxing you. And you can't help but get swept up in that. And of course, these are the experiences that we have. Every time we're reading stories from the autobiography or every time we read the lives of a great saint, these are the legacies that we see. We're right in the midst of a course right now on the saints. And so last week I spoke about Neem Karoli Baba, and this week I'll speak on Ananda Moy Ma. And then in the last week, Shanti will be speaking on Saint Teresa and Saint John of the Cross. And it's a really wonderful opportunity, not only to come and hear the lives of these great saints, but for those of us who get to immerse ourselves in their lives. And so I spent much of my day yesterday reading 2 different books about Ananda Moy Ma. And I spent most of my week last week reading books about Neem Karoli Baba. And what I realized is that the legacy that they carry, at the end of the day, you're reading all of these incredible stories about raising people from the dead and manifesting. And, there was a story I was just reading this morning about Ananda Moy Ma, and at Kirtan, she would have these incredible, surreal, supernatural experiences. And there was a story where she was just caught in the bliss of the music, and her devotees were watching as slowly her body got smaller and smaller and smaller until it was just gone. And then it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and that pile of clothes, there was nothing but a pile of clothes, and then again she remanifested herself. And the mind can't grasp the understanding and the knowing of that. But these stories aren't what we remember more than anything. The stories are there, but the legacy that's left is a legacy of love. That's what we remember about Ananda Moy Ma, the bliss-permeated mother. What it means to be in that state of bliss, or even Neem Karoli Baba, who again has many stories I won't share. You can watch online if you want to hear about some of the stories, but so many miracles in his life, and the books that we know about him are just story after story after story of the miraculous events that occurred in his presence. And one of his disciples in one of the books, the introductions to one of the books that I was reading, she simply said the legacy of Neem Karoli Baba was the complete and being complete is the feeling when you're in his presence of being completely enveloped in bliss, and the totality of that absence. That's not the man itself. That's not Neem Karoli Baba. That's not the miracles that are present there. It's the feeling of love. It's the feeling of being completely held, of knowing beyond a shadow of a doubt that you are held in Divine Mother's arms. And this is the essence of faith. This is how we should pray. It's not the what of prayer, the power of prayer. That all comes and manifests through the one singular knowing that you are one with the divine and that she is holding you in her lap. You know, my favorite scene from Autobiography of a Yogi comes right after young Mukunda, Yogananda, meets his guru, Sri Yukteswar. And we always talk about the story and the power of he's frozen as he's seeing his guru down this lane, and he's just drawn closer and closer to his guru. But then they go back to the ashram and they spend a few hours speaking together and meditating. And after a long time of silence, Sri Yukteswar opens his eyes and he looks at Yogananda and he asks Yogananda to give him his unconditional love, which Yogananda does. And then he says this line that I was just quoting earlier. He says, "Divine love is without condition, without boundary, and without change." He says, "The flux of the human heart is gone forever in the experience of pure divine love." And then, this is my favorite line that he says. He pauses for just one more moment and he looks at young Mukunda at the time, right, just a young teenager, and he says, "If ever you see me falling from a state of God realization, take me in your lap and remind me of the divine cosmic mother that we both worship." And it's such a powerful and humbling moment because that image of just being held in somebody's lap, that's what each one of us is craving. You know, I have the great privilege of spending a lot of time with many people and just sharing spiritual stories, challenges, everything that goes on in our lives. It's what Lahari was speaking to at the beginning of our purification today, where she was talking about how we all have these challenges that we are facing, but when we invite God in and open our hearts, that doesn't matter what the challenge is, we can face it. And I've had that experience in my own life and also in speaking with so many people. The root of every single challenge can be answered with the question, how much faith do I have? And again, it's not faith that it's going to work out the way I want it to. Faith is the knowing, the complete knowing, the experience of being enveloped in Divine Mother's love, of being held in Divine Mother's lap, which is why that line is so poignant. Here's Sri Yukteswar, the Lion of Benares, who's looking at his spiritual son, and he says, "If ever you see me falling from a state of God realization, that state of pure love, untouched, unchanging, without boundaries, take me in your lap, promise to take me in your lap, and remind me of the cosmic mother we both worship." And that's what each one of us is craving and is asking for at the root of every challenge that we're facing. We want to know that Divine Mother will take us in her lap and hold us. You know, I have the privilege of working on our Instagram account here. It's one of the things that I get to do and take videos and share things on Instagram for Ananda Palo Alto. And the downside of that is that it comes with an Instagram account, which if any of you have been on Instagram, there are a lot of pictures of puppies and there are a lot of videos of puppies, and you can spend a long time looking at puppies if you want to, which I have been known to do. But there's this trend right now with a voiceover, which the voiceover is essentially like, "Let me just scooch in, excuse me, can I just scooch right in here?" And the voiceover always comes with pictures of dogs who are just plopping themselves right down. They're just squeezing in as close as they can get onto the laps of their owners. Sometimes it's these, Great Danes that are sitting on someone's lap and they're just so happy. Sometimes it's the tiniest little teacup dog and it's just curling itself and tucking itself right in as close as it can get. And it's sweet and it's fun to look at, but whenever I see them, I smile because it's the truth for each one of us as well. If Divine Mother were sitting right in front of us, we would just plop ourselves right down in her lap and just, "Excuse me, let me just scooch right in here and never leave," and have that happy, dopey smile just like the dogs do as they're being scratched and loved. And that's what we want. That's the very root and the very essence of what faith is. Can we move forward knowing that we can carry that same legacy, just like each one of the saints, just like each one of these great masters behind us? No matter how dramatic their lives have been, look at the life of Christ, a life that is so dramatic, and has been epitomized and symbolized in so many different ways. What is the one thing, more than anything else, that people carry away from the life of Christ? It's the power of his love. That's what we get. Ask, and ye shall receive. Know, and it shall be yours. You can walk through this life knowing that you are completely encompassed in Divine Mother's love, that nothing can touch you outside of that love. It doesn't mean we don't face challenges. It doesn't mean we don't face pain and anger and fear. All of that's part of the human experience. But if we are holding Divine Mother in the very center of our hearts, if we're holding that knowing, then nothing can touch us. Because underneath it all, we know that Divine Mother has a larger rhythm, a larger thread woven into the fabric of every single experience in our lives, in our lifetimes, in the entire cosmic universe, that there's a there is a thread woven into the tapestry of the entire universe. And it's threaded with love. It's threaded with that constant knowing, you are my child. You have everything that you need. I will never leave you. And if that voice is whispering in our ear, can't we face anything that comes our way? What can't we face if we know Divine Mother is whispering that I will never leave you? My love for you is without condition, without boundary, without change. There's no circumstance outside of my love. That's the power of prayer. That's the power of faith, and that's what we're striving for. And that legacy that each one of these great masters, I don't think I ever finished that question of what is the one thing people remember most about the life of Christ. It's not the drama, it's the experience of that love. I did finish that, and just to come back to that, but that legacy, that's alive for each one of us. And that's how we begin to cultivate that faith in ourselves. It's practice, it's prayer, it's concentration, it's meditation. But beyond all else, it's beginning to just express a life of love, to ask yourself the question, how can I offer my love today? How can I receive love today? Until, just like that beautiful prayer demand that Ekavir was reading, we get to the point of realizing and knowing that our I has one singular expression. Divine Mother is everywhere. Divine Mother is everything. I am never outside of that heartbeat. And then our legacy, the legacy of our life, becomes the same as the legacy of each one of these great saints. Becomes that absolute knowing that we are a manifestation of love and that permeation of love, that we are no different than the saints. In the very heart of it, that's what Yogananda tells us after his experience of cosmic consciousness. He says, I cognized the center of the Empyrean, the center of everything, as a point of intuitive perception in my own heart. And what is that point of intuitive perception? It's not about my heart. It's not about me. The point of intuitive perception is the realization and the knowing of love. That beyond all else, love is what sustains the universe, and we are never outside of it. So that's our legacy that we get to carry forward. God bless you all.
Nightingale, nightingale, sing of joy through the night. Teach my heart to impart everywhere your delight. Sing of moon rays on the rain, sing that love's not in vain. Every grief, every wrong has its ending in song. Nightingale, nightingale, sing of joy through the night. letting